Okay, so the track of this video is going to be somewhat different from my usual videos, in that it's a particularly philosophical video rather than a video about a specific subject, which is usually what I discuss. I want to talk about religion, theism, atheism, agnosticism. Now, clearly, I can't encompass everything I would like to say in one video, and I'm going to try and keep this under 20 minutes. I'll try my best, because I realize that sometimes I do talk for quite a while. Um, I've been watching Jurassic Park, and that kind of got me thinking on the broader theme of things. The old Earth, i.e., millions of years old, and subjects like evolution, like human anthropology, that sort of thing, has interested me for a long time. Um, so I'll just lay it bare what my broad position is at the moment, and then I'll go into some of the things I want to discuss. I regard myself as broadly agnostic, but with a spiritual side. So I don't regard myself as theist in that I don't definitively believe in a God, and I certainly don't follow organized religion. But I would never describe myself as atheist. Um, Even at times in my life when I've had deep doubts about religion, I've never quite went to the extent of describing myself as an outright atheist, and I don't think I ever will. Um, so broadly speaking, I am a spiritual agnostic. Spiritual because I believe in something, agnostic because I don't know. I just don't know either way, and I don't think that's something to be ashamed of. I think there's a concept that agnostics sort of sit on the fence, but to me, agnosticism is pragmatism. Um, it's intelligent because the fact of the matter is we simply do not know enough to absolutely say there is no greater deity. We certainly don't know enough to say there absolutely is. Um, so to me, agnosticism is practical. Um, I have made videos very critical of some of the extreme aspects of religion, so there's not a great deal of need to repeat myself in this. Needless to say, though, religion certainly does pose many problems. Religious fanaticism. To quote a recent example that is in the news, if we take Hindu fanaticism in India, a lot of people have been targeted over supposedly uh, eating or exporting beef. And the situation is getting quite ugly. Narendra Modi has been accused of not doing enough to rein in on the Hindu extremists. And it's not the first time that's been a problem in India. Um, Islamist violence is never out of the news. And in the United States, particularly, you have Christian fundamentalism. So I really don't need to go into details about what I mean by religious fanaticism. It can unfortunately be seen around the world, and it is a very real problem. It's also true that leaving aside issues like terrorism and violence, there are other problems that organized religion causes, especially, for example, its relations with contraception in sub-Saharan Africa. Um, there's a lot of issues around that. Now, the current pontiff has been pretty progressive as popes go. I have a lot of respect for him. I have to say, I think he's a good leader. I think he's done his level best to try and move the church forward. He represents over 1 billion Catholics, so it is important that he shows leadership. Um, and I've quite a lot of respect for him. There are some atheists who will say, "Oh, but he hasn't done this, he hasn't done that." I would make the point that he's one man; he can't do everything. But you have to acknowledge, you have to compare him to previous popes and recognize what he has done, which is actually quite profound by Vatican standards. Um, that's not to say that I say I respect them. I'm not like, I don't believe in idol worship of anyone. I don't believe that anyone is above critique. Um, and actually, there is a pseudo-religious aspect to personality cults. In Thailand, for instance, the blind worship of the King of Thailand is almost pseudo-religious, and it's not religious in the sense of being, you know, like organized religion, but it's religious in the sense of its blind devotion and its blind, uncritical thinking. Anyway, without beating around the bush, I want to discuss new atheism and some of the problems I see connected with that. Now, in case anyone misunderstands me, I have enormous respect for science, so this is in no way about promoting a new Earth theory or anything like that, which, by the way, I think is utterly baseless. I did have a debate actually with a young Christian man who happens to be from the same place as me, actually, but he tried to tell me dinosaurs are mentioned in the Bible, and that was claimed. Forget which book that he mentioned was Behemoths, which he said was a testament to dinosaurs. I think that sort of stubborn religious thinking that just stubbornly refuses to acknowledge the scientific facts doesn't help the cause of religion one little bit. Um, and certainly I would agree with atheists in critique of that sort of stubborn thinking. Um, but there is an aspect to new atheism which I really don't like, and there is a smugness to it. This can be seen in a number of individuals who are quite prominent and who could arguably be connected to new atheism, um, especially Pat Condell, online blogger, whatever you want to call him. He's famous for his very scathing remarks, especially on Islam, but on religion in general. I don't have much time for Condell. I think I made a video about that, but he's one example. Richard Dawkins, of course, is a famous example. Dawkins is quite, he very much has a professorial manner, but I think there is a slight smugness to some of his approaches as well. Bill Meyer, I think it's pronounced. But anyway, these are all people that can be associated with new atheism, and I think they all have a certain smugness in common. That's why I don't have much time for new atheism. I'm going to make a quote actually. This is from the Wikipedia article, but I think it's an interesting quote. And it's from the American Iranian religious studies scholar Reza Aslan. Um, this is not the philosophical atheism, and this is, they're talking about new atheism. This is not the philosophical atheism of Schopenhauer or Marx or Freud or Feuerbach. This is a sort of unthinking, simplistic religious criticism. It is primarily being fostered by individuals like Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, who have absolutely no background in the study of religion at all. Most of my intellectual heroes are atheists, but they were experts in religion, and so they were able to offer critiques of it that came from a place of knowledge, from a sophistication of education, of research. What we are seeing now is a sort of armchair atheism, people who are inundated by what they see in the news and media, and who then draw these incredibly simplistic generalizations about religion in general based on these examples that they see. Um, I more or less agree with that. I think there is definitely a tendency of some new atheists to sort of critique religion for the sake of it, and they rely on a lot on sort of a smug humor, and admittedly it can be quite witty at times, but I don't think you win arguments solely by mocking the other side. I don't think that is a very convincing way to win arguments, because all that does is really play into the hands of people who already agree with you anyway. Now, to people like me who are not on the other side, I'm not religious, it just comes across as smug. It's almost like if you see two presidential candidates and you're a swing voter and you don't know which side to believe, and you see one candidate who may be making good arguments, but then when the other candidate's speaking, he kind of rolls his eyes, or she rolls her eyes, and she comes across as quite rude. That's how sometimes new atheists come across to me. Like, they may well be right. They may well be right in all their arguments, but I don't think you win arguments simply by mocking the other side and by being smug. Now, they would argue there's plenty of things to mock. Um, I do believe there's a place for humor. I do believe that religion should absolutely be scrutinized. But all I'm saying is you don't win an argument simply by relying on humor and mocking and sarcasm. And too often that is what new atheists tend to do, rather than just getting into an adult discussion, debate about these matters. Um, so that is very off-putting to me. There's other aspects I take issue with. Now they will of course say that they're not hateful. They don't hate all religious people. Maybe that's true, but they do mock all religious people, and they do basically dismiss 4 billion plus people as brainwashed sheep. I say 4 billion plus because that's the estimate of religious adherents in the world. We can't be sure about these figures because there's a lot of debate as to what constitutes, how exactly do you measure a religious adherence, but it's certainly in the billions. Um, and if I were to project a guess, I would say it's definitely well over half of the global population would be religious. Certainly, religion has a massive cultural impact, even if people aren't particularly religious. There's parts of the world where people will say they're a Muslim but not exactly adhere to Islam. Likewise, there's parts of the United States I imagine people would just automatically say they're Christian without really thinking about what that means. So there is that cultural aspect. But nevertheless, I also think there are a lot of people who genuinely have religious convictions. And to simply dismiss them as idiots, I think is not only disrespectful, but it's simply not accurate. Um, there's been some highly intelligent people, leaders, pioneers, even some scientists who have had some sort of faith. So to simply dismiss anyone of faith as an idiot is, again, it's not a way to win an argument. It's also, there's a slightly, almost a callous aspect to that when I totally understand the argument when religion is imposing on others, by which we're talking about theocracy. And I've no need to go over all the problems that religion causes. But what new atheists, I think, need to accept is that whatever they think of religion, the fact of the matter is that is sacred to millions and millions and millions of people. In the darkest times, they rely on religion, and you could think, or new atheists could think that that's stupid, it's a waste of time, whatever, but it is a fact. The number of people that, when they're in a critical time, say they're on a sinking ship or a plane that's coming down, do they say, "Science, please save me"? No. A lot of people will pray to God. Now, is it a waste of time? Will it save them? These are all questions. The answer will be, yes, no, and so on. But that is a fact. Religion cannot be underestimated in terms of its social impact. And to suggest that that is entirely negative, I think is incredibly short-sighted and frankly a bit lazy. To say that religious influence is entirely bad. There's another aspect I have a problem with. Um, a lot of atheists get really annoyed when some religious people say that religion inspires good deeds and so on, and they say, "Oh, but you don't need to be religious to know right from wrong." Well, of course you don't. But there's an inconsistency in their argument because what they're arguing is religion is entirely bad. Now, if they agree that you don't need religion to be good, to have moral values, um, surely it follows that they would recognize that religion isn't entirely bad. So for example, I guess I didn't word that too well, but what I'm trying to say is it's a bit unfair to sort of criticize religious people for saying you need religion to know right from wrong. And incidentally, not every religious person has that view. So it's unfair to criticize religious people for that, and then suggest that religion is entirely bad, because that is sort of suggesting that if someone's religious, they are following something bad, therefore they must be bad. So it's an inconsistent argument. What I would suggest is whether religion or without religion, you can have morals, but I don't think it's atheists have to offer something a bit more than simply saying religion is bad, full stop. To me, that's just a very lazy argument. It doesn't really prove anything. Sure, you can think of lots of examples of the negative side of religion. You can talk about religious fanaticism, terrorism, discrimination against women, etc., etc. And that's all true. But that totally overlooks many of the good things that are done in the name of religion. Very often, it's religious people who are on the front line in some desperate humanitarian situations. Take, for example, the work of the Salvation Army, who spend all their time working with the homeless. Look at the work of the Red Cross, the Red Crescent. The list goes on and on. Now, atheists will say, oh, but that's, you don't have to be religious to have that. But I would say that contradicts their argument that it's entirely bad. At the very least, I would like them to acknowledge that religion is not 100% bad. And my problem with new atheists is they can't bring themselves to do that. Their outlook is simply religion bad, full stop. And it's like, I'm not saying they should agree with it. I'm not saying they should agree with the ideology or the thinking. All I'm saying is to dismiss it as entirely bad. It's just plain lazy. And I think even Richard Dawkins has conceded that that's not the case. So that's what I don't like about new atheism. I do agree with Reza Aslan. I think there is a ultra simplicity to this. Everything's black and white, and the reality is a lot more complex. Common sense shows that it is a lot more complex. Here's another aspect. Saying that all the world's problems are caused by religion, and this is a claim that is sometimes being put forward by new atheists, is profoundly ridiculous. Again, religion certainly causes massive problems, but you can hardly blame, for example, pollution on religion. Pollution comes about from man-made problems, factories gulching toxic chemicals into the air, car exhausts, stove fires in northern India. These are the things that cause pollution. So how is that a religious problem? How is the problem of street gangs? How can you blame that on religion? Um, how about endangered animals? Hunters hunting them down for ivory or their skins. There's many, many problems in the world that have the idea that all the world's problems can be blamed on religion is unfair and ridiculous. Um, so that's something I think needs to be challenged. There's another aspect, which is that some of the worst persecution in the 20th century was against religion and religious people. This was the case in Mao Zedong's China, Pol Pot's Cambodia, and Stalin's Soviet Union. In fact, in the Soviet Union, estimates are as a conservative figure is 12 million Christians were persecuted in one way or another in the Soviet Union. And this can be seen throughout the 20th century. Now, again, that sort of flies in the argument that religion causes all the world's problems. As far as I'm concerned, I, I am absolutely a believer in secularism and strictly dividing religion from the state. And I don't want religious groups or religious people imposing their religion on wider society. But likewise, I don't want to live in a society where religious people are bullied into silence. And I have come across, in fact, some atheists who, even hearing the word God, they have a tantrum and they would want to silence people even discussing their religion, even discussing it. I'm not talking about trying to convert people, I'm talking about even using the word God. To me, that's ridiculous. And if we as a society believe in values such as free expression, you know what? That extends to religious people as well. They should have the free expression to discuss their religious views. That's different from trying to impose religious views. So I do think there is an intolerance with new atheism and a smugness, and I'm quite critical of it. I've made videos before critiquing, for example, the rise of fundamentalist Islam. I believe I made a video on the Westboro Baptist Church. Those are all issues that are well documented, and anyone with common sense would recognize that there is a problem with religion. I mean, I'd be equally critical of religious people who try to pretend that these problems have no connection with religion and say things that, oh, they're just terrorists, they're not Islamic terrorists, and so on. I'm very critical of that sort of thinking. But the new atheist thinking that all the world's problems are the fault of religion is just short-sighted and ridiculous. Well, I've went over 20 minutes here, so I'm going to round it up. Feel free to let me know your thoughts. If you're an atheist, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I'm not attacking all atheists, and I'm not attacking even atheist thinking, although I'm not an atheist myself. I've no problem with people who don't believe in God. That's fine. A final thought. One of my personal issues with, I guess you could maybe call this insecurity or whatever, but for me, the idea of simply rotting away when you die is somewhat depressing. Um, Science can't explain the how, but doesn't explain the why. And for me, if we have evolved to the point of having the brain capacity that we have, having the thinking that we have, humanity has built great cities and so on and so on, there must be a purpose to it other than just ions and atoms colliding with each other. Why is it that the human species has evolved to be by far the most advanced of any species? To me, there has to be something in that. There has to be a purpose. So that's just my personal feeling about it. I do hope this video is not misunderstood. I'm not attacking atheists. Just critiquing some aspects of new atheism, which I think needs to be challenged.